You're watching Alive and Well. I'm your hostess, Ann Bratsburg, and we are still at the Michigan Commission for the Blind, their Lansing office, and now I am with the state director, is that right?
Correct.
Of the Michigan Commission for the Blind. This is Mr. Pat Cannon. Hi, Pat. How you doing?
Hello, Ann. Good to be with you.
You too, definitely. I spoke with you a few weeks back and said, can I interview you? And you said, yeah.
Of course.
So I want to start kind of like I did with Lehman in asking you, when did you become blind, and how did that go? How did you adapt? Had you already started to function as a sighted child, or what did you start out learning from the get-go?
Well, Ann, I was born with lousy vision that got progressively worse.
Okay.
And I was in my early teens when I was first told that I was legally blind.
Oh, wow.
So I went through the public school system. I did not go to the school for the blind.
Okay.
And I think the first cognizance that I didn't see things as well as other kids or had some vision issues was the fact that I was born with a badly crossed left eye.
Oh, okay.
And doctors told my folks that was because I had a weak muscle in my left eye. And in those days, one of the ways they addressed a weak muscle was to put a patch over the good eye to force a kid to use the poor eye, the thinking being that would force the kid to use the poor eye and strengthen the muscle and help address that. That did not have a good effect. All it really caused me to do, and by this time I was in first or second grade, I wore glasses and then trying to put a patch over my good eye, and then I saw almost nothing out of my left eye. So I mostly sat in the corner and wasn't very engaged, so they ultimately figured out that this wasn't working. I eventually had surgery to correct the crossed eye situation, and so I don't often deal with the crossed eye now, unless sometimes if I'm extraordinarily tired, I've been told my left eye will wander a little bit. But other than that, it didn't have much of effect on my vision. And when I was about 8 years old, and I had an experience. It was a summer evening on the northeast side of Detroit, and I was outdoors with my sisters and some cousins, and they were talking about the stars in the sky. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and I said, what stars? Where? And they said, well, right there. And that's when I realized I never could see stars and never have seen stars in the sky. I have retinitis pigmentosa.
That was my next question.
And commonly referred to as RP. And RP is characterized by two conditions that affect our vision. One is tunnel vision, a narrowing field of vision, and the other is night blindness, because our night vision comes out of the periphery of our field of vision. So anyone with impaired peripheral vision usually has impaired night vision as well. And so that was my introduction to the label of retinitis pigmentosa.
Isn't that hereditary? And if so, was your family prepared for that? Were there other people in the family who had that, or were you the first?
Oh, that's a long, long, long story. But it was frustrating to my mom and dad, because doctors would say, if this is what we think it is, and if it is what we believe it is, it's probably hereditary. Any history of blindness in your family. And my mom would think and think and think, and my dad would do the same, and they could not identify anyone in our family that had any real significant vision issues. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later that we discovered that my mother's biological father was not who she thought it was. And that's, I'll make a long story short here, but that's when we discovered that my mother's biological father was not the guy to whom my grandmother had been engaged and ultimately married, but to another young man who lived in the town down the road.
Oh, wow.
And he was a photographer and was losing his vision. And as a result of his losing his vision, and this is in the early 20th century, losing his vision as a photographer, it was quite a difficult thing for him to deal with. So and I didn't learn about that until probably 20 years ago.
Wow, that's something. And back then, trying to handle that would have been horrible.
Yep.
Wow. So tell me how you were in high school, or actually you had said was it junior high that you'd learned you were legally blind. When did you lose usable vision, and then When did you start to learn, like, did you function with Braille, with audio cassettes? How did it work going through high school and college?
Well, like a lot of people who lose their vision gradually, they don't identify themselves as a blind person. I would say I have poor vision. I have lousy vision. That aside, I had the same hopes and dreams and aspirations like other kids growing up in that part of the city at that time. Early childhood, I wanted to be a cowboy, or like Superman, or a race car driver, or truck driver. And actually, I held on to that dream of being a truck driver until I was 14, when the doctor told me that I would be totally blind someday, and I was already legally blind, and I probably would not be able to get a driver's license.
Oh, wow.
So, to this day, I never have driven legally. So I abandoned my desire to be a truck driver and started to point in different directions.
What did you start to point in? When did you actually decide on a career? When did you decide to go to college as opposed to choosing vocational? How did that all go?
Most of my careers have been accidents. Like I said, I wanted to be a truck driver, and then I thought I wanted to go into counseling of some sort, and then I thought, no, I wanted to go into the information technology. And to make a long story short, the careers, I've had 3 very different careers, and all of them were accidental.
Oh, wow.
When I was going to Macomb College many years ago, I got a part-time job at a radio station in Detroit, and that led to a full-time job. And I worked at WJR in the Fisher Building in downtown Detroit, or actually the New Center area.
I remember WJR.
Yep, and I started working in the mailroom at WJR, and that was in the days of J.P. McCarthy and Bud Guest and a lot of the folks that are really sort of legends of WJR radio. And while I was working in the mailroom, I got the radio bug, and I was befriended by J.P. Soon after I started working there. And he encouraged me to pursue it. He said, follow your dream and give it a try. To make a long story short, after a couple of years of working in the mailroom at WJR, and then once in a while they would let me go on the air, then I decided that's what I wanted to do, and I got a job at a country and western station in Salinas, California.
Oh, wow.
Where I was a part-time DJ, and the rest of the time I was a salesperson with the radio station. So that's how I sort of fell into radio broadcasting. And I worked in that business for 13 years.
No kidding.
Mostly as a DJ, news person, and some sales and copywriting. And I wound up back in the Detroit area on the air doing a telephone talk show and program director at a Detroit area station until the late 70s when I moved to Lansing.
Wow. And we're being summoned. We have to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to talk about how your career evolved into where you're at now.
Okay.
And then also talk a little bit on the personal angle about, your wife and family and some of the things you enjoy doing. Once again, you're watching Alive and Well. I'm Ann Bratsburg, and with me is Pat Cannon. He is the state director for the West Michigan Commission for the Blind, and we'll be back in a moment.